So I am here with Craign Scribner, and we are talking to a couple folks who've had an advanced preview of the Apollo product that Search Discovery is bringing to the market. So Craig, wanted to see if I could start off by just having you kind of tell everyone, how long have you kind of been in the analytics space, and how long have you really been involved with kind of managing analytics implementations?
Almost 20 years in the space, but managing implementations is something that I did for about 12 years.
If you think back about the 20 years that have gone by, like what has it been like to manage digital analytics implementations, like the day-to-day of an implementation?
First of all, there's the whole phase of architecture where it's almost like a painter starts on a blank canvas. That's what it always felt like for me. A new implementation meant asking all the business stakeholders questions and mapping it to technology requirements. And it was starting over every time. That
Yeah.
was the biggest thing. And then maintenance, of course, is a beast unto itself.
Yeah. And well, you and I are old timers, and we've been doing this for, I think, probably around the same time, 20 years. So what's interesting is we've seen that the whole process of managing digital analytics implementations hasn't really changed in the last 20 years. Why do you think that people are still doing things the same way today that we did it in the early 2000s?
Well, I disagree that it hasn't changed. I mean, tag management was a big
Yeah.
change, launched, and I mean, there have been some differences, but the idea of starting every implementation from scratch, that has stayed the same from the beginning. And that has been the most overwhelming thing that occurred to me as you were showing me Apollo, was that it doesn't have to be, just because an implementation is custom, doesn't mean that we have to start from scratch every time, that we can't reuse
Yeah.
tried and true best practices and previously written code.
Yeah, kind of gets back to the old Omniture Fusion days, if you remember those.
I do.
So you had a sneak peek of Apollo. What were your kind of initial just impressions about how it could potentially change an organization's process for managing and improving a digital analytics implementation? And also, what do you think could be like the larger ramifications for the whole industry?
hmm So right after I saw Apollo for the first time, I talked to someone who was currently in the throes of that of a new architecting and implementation project, and he just described the challenges of not only having to go to developers and describe to them what he needed, but he had to QA that, but also had to see if what they were delivering really matched up to what the business owners wanted in the first place. And so it was a real precarious dance of trying to get people aligned around projects where he was this middleman bridge. And that is something I think that is an art that is going to go away with Apollo. We don't need to necessarily, we don't need to keep reinventing best practices around answering certain questions. Start with the question and use the code that's already been developed for that. And you don't have to relay that to developers who are trying to get a picture. I think it's going to change everything as far as Adobe Analytics, how those implementation projects are crafted and changed. And I say Adobe Analytics because that's my background, but I see the same thing for the same kind of custom implementations that are done in other tracking systems like Google Analytics. I see this same approach really revolutionizing, what you and I have seen remain the same all these decades.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why we've tried to build Apollo on a flexible architecture that could work with really any analytics tool. But yeah, I mean, we've seen the same things done over and over again, and that's why we're really excited to kind of shake it up a little bit, change the way things are doing. So, last question. So you saw a lot of the features of Apollo. We went through an extensive demo. We talked about business requirements. We talked about how you can automatically build your tagging. You could automatically push things to tag management, calculated metrics, automatically create dashboards, QA, all that stuff. What were your kind of like favorite features? What are the things that you really like gravitated towards?
First of all, not having to rebuild that code for every business requirement. That is huge. I have made some terrible mistakes as not, as a kind of on the fly coder. who learned JavaScript to do this kind of tracking. And there were some things that were just outside my understanding, and I broke as many things as I fixed during that time. So I think a lot of the bumps in the road for an implementation are gonna go away. The time it takes, I think, is gonna be the primary impact at the beginning, just because it is, it can go on for months. And I think, what you showed me could have changed months worth of work down to weeks or even days. And then, but on an ongoing basis, I love the aspect of having a living requirements doc, a living place that's connected to your APIs. It's not just an Excel document that somebody pulled up and worked on a year and a half ago, and we have to dig up because, I mean, those things have never worked for long term. And I really think Apollo's, as a true version control of your implementation, it can mediate the fact that people like you and I spend maybe 18 months with a specific client before we move on to our next gig. And then, and it's going to prevent the next analyst from coming on board and starting everything from scratch, ripping up all the tracks and starting over.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we're really excited about, is the interconnectedness, and that always having an implementation that's updated, documented, and so on, and just the speed to actually getting to use your data instead of talking about implementing all the time. And we see that so many people spend so much time on implementation, and then we actually want to use the data to impact the business, which then helps everyone. So we're really excited about it. So cool. Well, thank you so much for taking a couple of minutes out of your day to share your thoughts. We're really excited to bring Apollo to the market. We're excited to have people like you kind of check it out and spread the word about it. So thank you so much for joining us here today.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking.
X minus 3, 2, 1, 0.